Wonderful. I think we can kickstart as other people are chiming in. Good morning, everyone, and thank you very much for joining today's conversation. Poland keeping tabs on the region's industrial powerhouse organized by Klinia Task Force. I'm Tamara Lagurashvili, Director of Central Eastern Europe at CATF, and I'm really happy to be here today just to provide very short opening remarks. For those of you who might not be aware of Klinia Task Force, we are a global climate organization with more than 25 years of work experience working to catalyze pragmatic solutions needed to tackle some of the worst impacts of the climate change. Today marks the third webinar in the series of our project called CEETalks, which really tries to take a holistic view and stocktake of the energy transition of Central and Eastern Europe, this increasingly important and dynamic region for Europe's climate and decarbonization and competitiveness quest. We have already organized and hosted two highly successful webinars, one really offering a high-level stocktake of the energy transition stories of Central and Eastern Europe, especially as last year most of the countries in the region have celebrated 20th year of EU accession. In the second webinar, which was right after COP29, we looked at Central and Eastern Europe's role in the global decarbonization foray, especially in the new geopolitical reality, how the region can play even more important role in these conversations. This year, we will be offering the country deep dives and showcasing unique stories and opportunities and challenges of the countries in the region. To emphasize that while there are many common challenges across the region, there is lots of diversity within the region which has to be properly assessed and utilized in order to be leveraged for the energy transition. So today, as the name suggests, we are tackling Poland, the industrial powerhouse of the region. And really, this conversation comes at a very interesting time. A lot of things have aligned really so that Poland is very well positioned to lead some of the conversations about the industrial decarbonization. First and foremost, of course, as of January 1st, Poland has taken the helm from Hungary for the EU Council presidency, and it will be shaping some of very important conversation at the EU level for the next 6 months. We already saw that energy security is going to be a very important aspect of Polish presidency and some of the stringent measures for phasing out Russian fossil fuels, but also the efforts for industrial decarbonization, social cohesion, and just transition are going to be equally important efforts along the way. On the other hand, on February 26, we will hopefully see the much anticipated draft of the Clean Industrial Deal, a foundational and flagship document that will shape the work of the new mandate of the European Commission for the next 5 years. And obviously, as the Clean Industrial Deal will attempt to provide some of the pragmatic solutions for lowering the energy prices, supporting the companies in some of the most energy intensive sectors, and promote the clean technologies. It seems that industrial decarbonization competitiveness is going to be really the key factor for championing the energy transition. We have already gone through the super year of elections. We have seen some of the elections and the results in Europe, as well as we will be obviously seeing how the US election would unwind and what kind of implications it will have on the Central and Eastern Europe. So with a lot of uncertainty, but also excitement down the road, Poland has a lot of tasks to lead and be in the leading position, increase the ambitions on its energy goals. Obviously, domestically as well, Poland will be very busy next year updating some of the policy strategies. We will have the finalization, hopefully, of the hydrogen strategy. Hopefully, we will also see a well-rounded CCS strategy, which is much needed for some of the hard-to-abate sectors. And we will see, for instance, the final version of NSCP, but also PEP 2040. So it's going to be really hot season for Poland, both domestically and at the EU level and internationally as well. So with a lot of things aligning together, really all the eyes are on Poland and its efforts for the industrial decarb. So with that, I would like to introduce our stellar panel that will do a little bit of deep dive in today's conversation. So we have Michal Hitpansky, President of the Board at Instrad Foundation. Good morning, Michal. Thank you very much for joining today's conversation.
Thank you, Tamara. How are you?
I'm well, thank you very much. And then we have Piotr Mikusek, Director of Regulatory Affairs, Group Azoti. Hello, Piotr, and thank you very much for joining.
Good morning, Tamara. Thank you.
Good morning. Alessia Viron, Government Affairs Director, Europe at Clean Task Force. Good morning, Alessia. Thank you very much for joining.
Good morning. Thank you for inviting me.
And today's session will be moderated by Bartholomew Cupid, Policy Advisor at Clean Task Force. Thank you again very much for everybody joining to our stellar panel, to everybody joining us virtually from across the world. And Bartek, I give now the word to you, and I wish all of you a very fruitful conversation today. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tamara. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today at our webinar. As Tamara has already mentioned, today we focus on Poland as an industrial powerhouse in CEE region, as it tries to maintain its competitiveness while trying to undertake decarbonization measures. My first questions will go to Michał Hetmański from Instrad Foundation. Michał, Poland's decarbonization efforts are often seen as lagging behind other EU member states. From Instrad perspectives, how EU institutions can support Poland's decarbonization efforts, especially in heavy industry sector?
Great. Thanks, Bartek, for this question. I think it's really important to take stock of what Poland has done over the previous years. Even despite the conservative government, we've managed to kick off one of the largest offshore programs in Europe, and the Baltic Sea will be in the years to come, I wouldn't say dominated, but definitely a source for offshore renewable energy for the electricity system in Poland. For instance, other partners like Bulgaria, Romania, but also other Baltic Sea countries are just following our way. So there is very often this remark that Poland is dominated by coal. And according to the not only Instrad analysis, but also plans by the transmission system operator, coal's share will diminish from the current 60%, previously 80%, to just less than 10% in a decade from now. So the decarbonization of electricity system will be mostly delivered by the combination of renewables, offshore, and gas power plants in the next decade. So I wouldn't like to say that the issue is solved, but we already have a plan for that. And now we need to move to industry. And I believe compared to buildings and transport, this is a real challenge, because we often think of hard to abate sectors and we tend to combine them. But for instance, in transport, we already have a technology alternative that is quite cost competitive. I mean, for mostly e-mobility, for individual cars. Some people speak of the role of hydrogen in the sector. In buildings, we do know that thermal retrofitting might be quite time-consuming to have the gains delivered, but the public can definitely support this with funds, with subsidies to allow this heat pump uptake to happen, right? So we already have the technologies and we already have the instruments launches. We have none of that, unfortunately, in the industrial sectors. And I think this is one of the biggest challenges now for the CE region, because we have a similar situation, for instance, German or South European fertilizer or steel producers are facing definitely the same competition as we do when it comes to the non-EU products imported from abroad, for instance, from North African or Russian and Belarusian gas-derived products. They are simply more competitive. And with this increasing pressure, the idea to decarbonize industrial production through electrification, which I obviously 100% support, is hitting the barriers. And I think we need to advocate for an ambitious decarbonization of the industrial sector. We need to be extremely open and direct when it comes to the assessment of the needs. The current estimates, the latest estimates about the costs of hydrogen production and the associated risks and capital requirements are a major deal breaker for launching, like, hydrogen-powered green steel plant that we are advocating for. Even with the rise of CO2 prices to the level of 300 to 400 euro per CO2 ton, a green steel plant would maybe then become competitive, but to deliver this one in the current regulatory environment, this would be immensely challenging for both financial and political reasons. Our estimates suggest that even a middle-sized green steel plant in Poland would cost at least 2.5–3 billion euros, and we might be actually not estimating the full scale of this kind of investments. We speak of a potentially value chain investment size similar to a nuclear power plant, and I'm just speaking of a first primary steel producer. We have Piotr today from the fertilizer company who could also provide a similar capital requirement. But please correct me, Piotr. Definitely, a total value of these investments definitely exceeds the bargaining power of these companies on the capital markets for mostly. It's not only about, like, smart minds like Piotr to deliver, to combine those investments, but do we have a much higher barriers to enter this. And the message that I would like to leave you from this webinar today is that we need to bring it to the highest political level, to the prime ministers, to the ministers. We need to bring those details. And I simply fear that the current leadership of the government is just left behind with some simple narrative. Oh, Europe can't afford the energy transition, or we need to remain competitiveness, so we can't cut the current production. I represent a totally different view. Full gas at electrification of the industrial sectors, whenever and wherever that's possible, but it's not going to happen through the current frameworks. We need to bring politicians also to the table so that they understand and they unlock the barriers through channeling EU and state government money, and also ensuring that we have the right regulatory framework to deliver those investments. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Michał. And Michał, could you elaborate a bit, maybe how do you think we can change the government perspective or narrative on energy transition in industry?
I remember I think 8–10 years ago, we've been speaking for mostly about the costs of windmills, right? That they cost so much, they bring so much of the concrete or steel. It's all very, like, complicated. And after a decade, none of these arguments are left. So we definitely see the benefits. We have corporates like Google or beverage producers, like almost everyone in the private sector, not only big tech companies, but also national companies, telecoms, using corporate PPAs. They need windmills, they need onshore wind energy this next year to help them, like, meet their green targets, to remain competitiveness, to show that their product, their service is green, carbon or climate neutral, right? So we've unlocked not only, like, the real investments, but we mainstreamed the benefits and the understanding of those. And we need to do the same with green steel, green cement, or carbon neutral cement, or green fertilizers. We need to empower also the consumers, for instance, automotive groups, or maybe the agricultural sector, or the food and beverage producers, so that they can say, hey, with our initiative, with our bargaining power, we made those investments happen, and that's how we remained competitive now, right? We might have not stick to the initial idea that we have from the 2019, from the EU Green Deal. We've corrected, we've done a revision, we've done it in an honest manner, and we delivered 80–90% of the targets assumed before. So I really count on activating those private sector initiatives, and we do have both foreign and domestic national entrepreneurs who are advocating for the shift in energy policy and for their participation in the green value chain.
Thank you, Michał. Very interesting insights. Piotr, my second question goes to Piotr Mikusek from Azoty Group. Piotr, lately there has been a lot of discussion about competitiveness and energy transition. Ursula von der Leyen, she has announced a Clean Industrial Deal. Also, recently, Mario Draghi report has been published. Everybody was speaking about it. And could you tell me from your perspective, how does the competitiveness of the EU industry align with the EU climate and energy transition goals?
Okay, thank you so much, Michał, Kuba, for this question. Because I mentioned about Michał, because maybe I will start at the point when Michał was stopped. Because as you know, I am representative of energy-intensive sectors, and maybe before whole argument, I will say one thing that now, and we never ever have a simple questions for the complicated issue. And why am I mentioning that? Well, because in my opinion, we are now like Odysseus being between Scylla and Charybdis, because one hazard is breakdown of the European social welfare and contract because of the industrialization, and another hazard is further acceleration of global warming. So in my entire argument, I will focus on energy-intensive sector or carbon leakage sectors, heavy industries. It doesn't matter how we will name it. Everybody knows about what I am speaking. I think that these sectors are some kind of litmus papers of problem occurring at the intersection of climate, energy, and industrial policy issues. And we have several reasons to focus on energy-intensive sectors. And maybe basic, first of all, these sectors, energy-intensive sectors, employing more than 7 million people across the whole European Union. And I think this is need to be underscored. They are often also giving employments to denizens living outside large urban centers. Additionally, these sectors are also cornerstones for economic activities, providing basic commodities like basic chemicals, steel, fertilizers, cement, or fuels. So, as the name implies, the share of energy cost in production of cost energy intensive sectors are various, but is much higher than in the other sectors. And maybe a few examples. The share energy cost in production is above 20%, 25% in sectors like organic chemicals, nitrogen fertilizers, cement, iron, and steel. So that means that incrementing energy cost for these sectors will be fatal blow. And of course, when I speak about increasing energy costs, I don't speak only about electricity. I'll also speak about, for example, natural gas, which is in some sector used not as energy carrier, but as a feedstock, for example, in nitrogen fertilizer sectors. So maybe trying to simplification, we can, you asked me about competitiveness. So I can some kind of simplification this using four maybe factors that depends on competitiveness. And first of all, we have the aforementioned cost of energy. Second, we have labor cost. Third, we have the cost of input materials other than energy, of course. And the third, in broad sense, some kind of cost of regulatory compliance. And why I am mentioning that? Because I think we can recognize impact of the climate policy to the industrial policy by analyzing these four sectors. And when we start from the point of view labor cost. In European Union, in my opinion, we don't have any possibility to try building competitiveness on labor cost because our way of life and welfare state. And in my opinion, it's a matter of fact. Also, labor costs in Central East Europe are increasing. And for example, I checked before our webinar, in Poland, last 10 years, labor cost was rising maybe this 100%, approximately 100% last 10 years. So of course, this labor cost is so much higher in, I don't know, Germany, France, or the Netherlands, but in long-lasting process, the gap will be backfired. Maybe I will don't talk too much about input materials, because everybody knows that European Union is rely on import of very raw materials, but also is rely on import of very basic materials like aluminium, and import reliance approximately 19%, lithium import reliance 80%, copper import reliance a little bit below 18%. So in this case, we also have limitation to improving and decreasing costs for heavy industry in the EU from point of view material cost. And maybe that is something that is the most interesting, energy cost. Because when we move to energy costs, I can start more optimistic, because energy costs are something we can influence more effectively through the creation right market framework and regulatory rules that fill this framework. But unfortunately, this optimistic point of view is ending here, because EU decarbonization model, par excellence expressed by Fit for 55 package, is not only inefficient, but worse, very dangerous for stability and security of the EU. And this model is not preventing, but now it accelerates the process of the industrialization, and it will be totally unstable when we remember that the costs of electricity of the European Union is 3 times higher than in the US, 4 much higher than in the China, and gas prices, and even 5 times higher in the EU than in the US. So maybe I will stop here, and I hope so that about these regulatory frameworks I could talk much more about later.
Thank you, Piotr. Okay, so Alessia, my third question goes to you. As we all know, Poland has recently assumed its presidency in EU Council. Recently, you have also written a very interesting blog post on the challenges and opportunities of Polish presidency. And what are your expectations of Polish presidency regarding EU decarbonization efforts, and especially in the area of bringing the CEE region perspective into the EU broad discussion?
Thank you, and thank you for inviting me. I'm really much looking forward to the discussion today. Before addressing the presidency and the expectation, I do want to quickly mention several elements that have been mentioned already. It's the context within which the presidency is taking place. We are looking at a very different geopolitical situation than we were when the Green Deal was designed, with the invasion of Ukraine, with election in the US. We're also looking at new topics that have emerged as really important at the EU level: competitiveness, energy security. But we're also looking inside the EU at a very different situation among some member states. We see Germany and France having some internal political trouble. And so by comparison, Poland appears as one of the EU largest member states that is politically stable. And there is a lot of expectation for Poland to take a stronger role in Brussels, in their presidency, but also beyond. The expectation for Poland presidency are incredibly high, especially after the Hungarian one. And so I'm going to try to focus on 3 main topics. The first one is related to industry. So as was mentioned, the EU is soon going to present the Clean Industrial Deal, and Poland will have the presidency while the Commission is kind of drafting the first step of its new flagship program. So Poland has an opportunity to contribute and shape the discussion on something that will be the key program and the key policy of the European Union for the next 5 years. And Poland has a lot to bring in the discussion on industrial decarbonization. As was mentioned, it's one of the powerhouses in terms of industry of Europe, and they've already worked on the industrial decarbonization and be able to identify what has been working and what has not been working. And that's definitely something they can bring at the EU level, kind of their experience and expertise and what they have encountered while decarbonizing quite a broad range of industry across sector, but also using a very broad range of technology to decarbonize this industry. So that's kind of a very important opportunity for Poland to bring in this perspective in the industrial debate. What is really important for Poland to bring in this industrial debate at the EU level is also more of a CEE perspective, because when we're looking now at how the technology are geologically placed in Europe, we do see some kind of risk for the CEE to not be able to access all the technology at similar cost compared to other countries in Europe. So if you take, for example, carbon capture and storage, we do see that a lot of the CO2 storage are located in Northern and Western Europe. And so when we look at the potential cost, we see that there is a risk for the CEE country to face costs up to 6 times higher than some other country if they want the industry to be able to use that technology to decarbonize. And we see similar issue with different technology. And that's definitely something that Poland needs to stress at the EU level when planning new network for CO2, for hydrogen, when looking at the technology needed to decarbonize industry. We need to make sure that all regions of Europe have access to this technology at an affordable cost so that they can all decarbonize and that no region will be left behind because they won't be able to access technology at a reasonable cost and then with the consequences that it would lead. So that's for kind of the industry side. Another very important point is related to energy. Security, without surprise, is a very big part of the Polish presidency agenda, and energy security has been extremely high in the EU discussion for the last year due to the consequences of Russia's invasion of Ukraine. And the CEE are very well placed to kind of provide important input in the discussion on energy security as they realize the risk of Russian dependency earlier than other countries in the EU, and also because in this last year, they demonstrated incredible resilience in trying to diversify their energy sources. So we're definitely hoping that they will be able to bring in this important discussion forward. We're also seeing that the Commission has announced that the plan to withdraw for Russian import is already expected next month, and that's definitely something that the Polish presidency can carry on in the discussion. Another point when we're discussing energy security is the importance of having different energy sources on the table. So at the EU level, sometimes we do tend to focus on a very small range of technology. We've paid a lot of attention to wind, solar energy, but Poland has kind of developed a broader range of technology, also looking at SMR, geothermal, not only green, but also blue hydrogen. And that's kind of a pragmatism that could be very useful at the EU level when we're looking at our energy independence and diversification. And that's something that Poland could bring to the debate and the discussion that would be very useful. Another point that would be really important to bring into discussion is related to the just transition. So we've seen in the last election a lot of backlash against green policy, and that's because people have felt disconnected and scared about the cost of who is actually going to pay for this transition. And that's a fair comment, like nobody can really care about climate if you don't know if you're going to afford your bill at the end of the month. And when we look at the Green Deal, a lot of positive steps have been taken on many different topics, but there is a common agreement that the social part of it have been lagging behind. And it's due to many different factors, the fact that there is a discrepancy in competences at the EU level, the fact that the political dynamics were not there, but there is a very urgent need to focus more on the just transition and to ensure that people will not pay the consequences of the green transition in a way that is too high for us. So Poland should kind of spearhead initiatives that facilitated skill development and job creation in green industry, because there needs to be a realization that transitioning to a low carbon economy is not only a way to address environmental concern, but also provide opportunity for economic growth and social cohesion. And so by championing fair and just transition, Poland can inspire confidence among citizens and among member states that the decarbonization agenda is a pathway to shared prosperity rather than a risk to social cohesion in Europe. Besides like this importance on jobs in the just transition framework, there is also an importance to bring more the internal EU cohesion when discussing the just transition, we do want to make sure that all countries will be able to decarbonize and that they will all kind of keep their industry. And that's also an important angle that Poland can bring to the discussion. So I'm going to stop here, but I do want to stress how high the expectations are for the Poland presidency. I think Donald Tusk himself was saying that he realized how high the expectations are and that it's almost impossible for Poland to do it. But we still have very high hope that this presidency will really kind of contribute to shaping the agenda for the next 5 years and will be able to kind of redirect some of the discussion at the EU level.
Thank you, Alessia. Yes, we do all have hope for Polish presidency, especially we in Poland, because we see that Poland has the potential to lead this decarbonization efforts in the new phase of energy transition in the EU. So, Michał, let's come back to you. In our discussion, competitiveness has been spoken of, and could you tell me how can Poland balance the need of remaining industrial competitiveness with its decarbonization goals? Michał, you are muted. Michał, you are muted. We cannot hear you.
Hold on, sorry. Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Sorry for the problem. So I was thinking for the last year, like, you know, because this term is evolving. So when we very narrowly think to the price competitiveness, and we speak when we think of a sector like steel, where we have this price parity between the Polish producers of raw steel, which is, let's say, 50 euro per ton more expensive than compared to the Turkish steel, which is made actually from the European and Polish scrap, right? So purely speaking, out of this price angle, we definitely can say now we have too high electricity prices, and this leads me to I wouldn't say a conclusion, but a remark that we've done something not right. We have this paradigm driven by, in my opinion, classic economics, that we need to increase CO2 price and lock this in a kind of non-political system like ETS, and we need to increase gradually the price for the sectors according to the level of the decarbonization, let's say, easiness, right? So we've increased CO2 price to the level of now, roughly speaking, 60 to 100 euro per ton in the electricity sector, and we will be further increasing this in buildings and transport, first 50 euro per ton in this ETS2 sector, and later we'll speak of hundreds euro per ton in the industrial sector. I wouldn't say I disagree with this level, but we do see a problem. For instance, in the US, they have a much cheaper electricity, which is not driven by only lack of ETS system, but of their own natural gas resources. Same holds for Arab countries. They are actually not the biggest industrial powerhouse, but we could also easily compare ourselves with Asian countries, right? And I don't only speak of Russia, but also of other post-Soviet countries, including Ukraine. We cannot remain competitiveness. We cannot not remain competitive with our costs of production if we increase electricity price first in Europe to allow for some market mechanism, right? I have very low faith in the CBAM being effective in kind of isolating our market from the other ones. I think this system, where when we're first increasing electricity price and later asking all the other sectors to get electrified, something has been done wrong here. And I think we need to rethink this idea. And at the same time, I need to give a big disclaimer. When I hear of from the previous and the current Polish government, and there used to be similar voices from Bulgaria, from Romania, from Czechia, that we need to rethink or withdraw from ETS system. It's not like that, right? So the solution to this problem is let's say, revision of of the instruments and not of the goal that we've set in the EU Green Deal. I wonder how it's exactly in the green fertilizers and green chemistry. So maybe Piotr can comment on that, but definitely in the industrial sector, in the steel sector, I can say higher electricity prices will definitely kill any economic case for electricity-driven scrap or primary steel-based producers. And if we want more green steel plants like the recent ones in Germany, in Italy, to emerge, to happen, also in Europe, we need to lower electricity prices instead of keeping them on a current high level. And I think we need to find a way to balance this, and the solutions and the instruments suggested in the EU Green Deal have been definitely not fit for the lower market maturity here in Central and Eastern Europe. So to summarize this, I really keep my fingers crossed for the Polish presidency to also bring in together other Central European countries about a solution, a tangible one, a doable one for the EU Commission to include their perspective about the low market competitiveness and lower level of market maturity to launch those investments in this part of Europe.
Thank you, Michał. That's very interesting insights. Piotr, you have mentioned in your previous comments the role of regulation in shaping the decarbonization efforts in the whole EU. Could you elaborate how the Fit for 55 regulations has impacted the industry in Poland, especially energy-intensive sectors?
Okay, thank you, Bartek, for this question. And you mentioned about, and in our webinar was mentioned about Fit for 55 package. So maybe I will very briefly say about what is Fit for 50 package at all. The Fit for 50 package, it was a complex initiative of regulatory measures which main target had been realization of the European Green Deal. That particular Fit for 55 package was created by 19 regulatory proposals, other words, regulation and directive proposals, and presented in 2021. Of course, after this date, this package started growing and growing because European Commission starts adding new regulatory measures linked with Fit for 55 package, and great example of this is Net Zero Industry Act. And the whole Fit for 55 package is fundamentally reshaping the rules of doing business in the energy-intensive sectors in the EU. And maybe I will give you a few statistics, and that this will be linked with that what Michał said. And first, the OECD shows the analysis that Fit for 55 package policies are projected to lead to a loss 2.1% of GDP per capita in 2035 compared to the reference scenarios. Reference scenarios, of course, without Fit for 55 package measures. And this is reflecting production costs increasing back of higher carbon pricing. And moreover, the OECD also forecasts that economic effects of Fit for 55 policies in 2030 will affect only in Poland by decreasing the real gross output of energy-intensive industries by almost 9%. It's a huge number. So, but not only OECD is alarming about impact of Fit for 55 package on European energy industry sectors, because we can say another example that we can read in Renewable and Sustainable Energy Transition Journal, that Śląskie Voivodeship is one of the regions in Poland because of high industrialization, is one of 5 most exposed regions of negative impact of Fit for 55. Sorry, I see that Michał raised the hand. So Michał, please, if you want to add something.
Actually, thanks for quoting the impact assessments, and I think most people in the audience might be also interested into the kitchen and details of that. But I've been following this debate, and purely because we're also an analytical house and a research group, I've been to some extent jealous. Ooh, they calculated something that was beyond our area of competence. I felt, oh, we need to also upgrade our level of understanding of industrial sectors. Some 4 or 5 years ago, I believe we've done this, and now I have a different view. We shouldn't draw one or two numbers. Oh, it's a negative impact or this the other industry. I do agree that now we're going into a scenario where we speak only of negative impacts. Why? Because of lack of action, right? So we should similarly to the power sector, where we draw an ambitious scenario where we say, hey, we get rid of coal and later gas. We substitute this with renewables, nuclear, and these are the benefits not only to the producers and suppliers of the construction materials for the power plants, but also to the consumers, right? They have a lower electricity. We should do the same now, a scenario-based thinking in particular industrial subsectors, where we speak not only about the cost, but also of the benefits. For instance, how much of the market they can save with their, let's say, cleaner or even 100% clean products like fertilizer, steel, cement, right? So we shouldn't be thinking only in this white-black logic of the potential loss. And I definitely agree with the approach done at that time. But I really keep my fingers crossed for the Polish government and also for the EU Commission to get deep into the regional aspects, to think of different markets, of their different maturity, of particular regions affected by this industrial transition, and to take stock of the potential losers, right? And where they should be supported from some just transition fund initiative or other, alleviation instruments. But let's not focus entirely on that, like we did with the coal mining sector. We should speak of this new pot of EU money from the financial perspective as a motor to catalyze new investments and the benefits for the particular regions, right? I really keep my fingers crossed for the new EU Commission to think of a better impact assessment approach, and not just of a one document, but also of a very close monitoring to what happens in particular industries.
Okay, so Michał, we totally agree that we are keeping our fingers for our government and effectively implementation of first climate policy and industrial policy. But what I think we should asking about that Fit for 50 package is helping that, or is some kind of red tape for this our target? Because we have plenty examples of this red taping situation in Fit for 50 package. First of all, maybe it's few examples. First of all, we are declaring that we are focusing on the cut of the emission, but at the same time, we are deteriorating positions of one technology against another technology. And basic example, nuclear technology against renewable technology, which great example we can find in taxonomy regulation, this lack of the technology neutrality. Secondly, instead of focusing on existing regulatory mechanisms of climate policy, for example, emission trade system, which is, by the way, in my opinion, one of the most effective mechanisms of climate policy, we are creating another bureaucratic target, like obligatory share of chosen fuel in road and maritime transport. And in my opinion, is even worse, because we are creating specific sub-targets in a completely irrational way. And the best example, I hope we can agree about that, is target of share of renewable fuels of non-biological origin in the industry that use hydrogen, these RFNBO targets from the RED III. The Polish Institute of Power Engineering shows that meeting this target in Poland will require 200,000 of RFNBO hydrogen, which is almost 11 terawatt hours of renewable energy. And how much of this RFNBO hydrogen we are producing in Poland now? Zero. And in 2030, we should increase our 0 kilogram to 200,000 RFNBO hydrogen, we can far more, in my opinion, effectively use these billions of euros to decarbonize energy system directly, or decarbonizing, I don't know, heat system. So I think this is a big problem for Fit for 55 package and Fit for 55 policy.
When I've been looking at for instance, Orlen's approach to this target at the very first glance, I was thinking, hey, they should actually limit down, because the refineries will be with us, unfortunately, for the next 20 or even 30 years to come. We'll be still using the imported oil from the Arab countries, non-democratic ones. I don't keep my fingers crossed for that, but as long as we need to acknowledge this industry there, I thought, hey, we should use this possibility to decarbonize this carbon footprint. But at the same time, when I'm thinking that we could use the same amount of electricity, of very valuable electricity in the power system, to decarbonize directly transport and mobility, to allow other charging network operators to emerge. Even Orlen says they want to have a third of the charging market in 10 years from now. This is a much more valuable and much more efficient on a system level version of that. So we could waste a whole lot of bioenergy or electricity only for the fuel sector, and this would actually, maybe not to the joy of Orlen, but to their interest in the long run to sustain their refineries. And I keep my fingers crossed for switching off the oil-based refineries, that as stranded assets will be still hampering the decarbonization of the transport sector. And once again, it's not only to the Orlen, it's also to the Polish Ministry of Climate, Ministry of Environment, but also in Czechia, where Orlen is still so dominant, in Lithuania, and also in other countries where Orlen expanded over there in last years. And this should be a joint revision, because these are also the markets with lower maturity of e-mobility, with also similar problems in addressing, like, you know, the excessive demand compared to the generation potential. We could go on further with this, like, you know, quite technical conversation, but I think this shows, like, you know, that even a fossil-based fertilizer producer like Azota and Piotr also do understand this need for decarbonization, but we need to think of a different route.
Yes, and the last statement. Sorry, Bartłomiej, sorry, Alicia. One statement, because Michał had his statement, and I must say my statement, that when we think about climate policy and industrial policy, two things. One, maintaining technology neutrality and focusing on cutting emission rather than promoting specific technology, because nuclear energy, CCS and CCU, biomethane has a larger role to play in the process of decarbonization. And the last one, we should implement effective tools of trade policy to prevent the current situation when subsidized and more carbon intensive and cheaper labor-based commodities displace the European manufacturing, because in my opinion it's pure madness that we are trying to decrease our natural gas import to Europe from Russia, but at the same time we are increasing our import of fertilizers, which is just processed natural gas. So we should link our climate policy and our trade policy. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Piotr. Thank you, Michał, for your very interesting statement. It shows that the discussion on competitiveness and decarbonization, it makes a lot of emotion in Polish society. And my last question goes to Alessia. Alessia, from European policy perspective, what specific initiatives should the EU institution undertake to meet particular challenges of the decarbonization?
Thank you. Maybe just first a few words to react to the discussion before. I do think that definitely the Fit for 55 was not perfect, but we do need to acknowledge that it is the first attempt to decarbonize our whole economy system, and it's not going to be perfect from the start. Targets do have their use, even if they're not perfect. That being said, I agree that on hydrogen, clearly at the EU level, mistakes were made. they were expecting amount of green hydrogen that will just not materialize, and they will now need to adjust the different hydrogen targets and where this hydrogen is going to be used if they want to be able to kind of deliver on what is needed. On like the importance of technology neutrality, it's something that we very much agree with, but we've seen recently that the Commission has indicated that they're hoping to like shift towards more of a technology neutral approach. We now have to see if it is just kind of something they say or if it's also something they do. But that's definitely something that is worth noting. On the importance of connecting climate and trade, that is something we fully agreed on. We do not want industry to leave Europe, but at the same time, we do need to decarbonize because there is no other alternative to decarbonization when we see the existing and already happening impact of climate change around the world. So that's just a few points that I wanted to say. Now, to answer your question, I think at the first point that the EU, but not only the EU and the member state we need to address is the very important question of funding. So when we look at the Draghi report, we see that they indicated that they expect that this transition of the economy in Europe towards a greener economy while remaining competitiveness will cost about 750 or 800 billion in annual funding. And we are very far from that number at the moment. Obviously, when they say that number, they don't mean that it has to be like our EU and member state grants. It has to take many forms, but regardless, we are very far from the number. And more importantly, we're also seeing that we are arriving at the end of the Recovery and Resilience Fund, which is at the moment the main source of decarbonization loan in Europe. So we are risking to see a moment where we need a lot of money, and what we get is actually less money if we don't take very strong action. And so that is, for me, something that is really urgent to address. How are we going to fund this transition? Who is going to pay for it? How is it going to be paid for it? At the EU level, we have many funds at the moment available. We have the Innovation Fund, we have the Just Transition Fund, we have the Horizon Europe funds. We have many of them, but they're not comprehensive enough. They're very scattered across different funding. They don't cover all of the needs. So for example, we do not have a deployment fund at the moment for like clean technology that the different industry we need. And that's definitely something that needs to be addressed urgently. We do need a deployment fund. We do need something to replace the Recovery and Resilience Fund to make sure that these amounts of money remain available across Europe. We need specific funds to also address any kind of regional disparity. We've heard more and more in the discussion an idea of relaxing the stated rule, which would be very much welcome, but has to go hand in hand with an increased budget to support the country that have fewer fiscal capacity to ensure that they're not going to lag behind, because some country will be able to come up with massive funding to support the industry that others just won't. And if we do not have the European budget to kind of palliate this gap, what we will have is like a two-speed Europe that we do not want to have. Talking about the budget in a broader way, we're also going to come closer to the multi-financial framework discussion, which is obviously a very important term at the EU level as it determines what is the level of EU budget. Poland has traditionally been one of the countries in favor of a larger EU budget. And I think that with the Draghi report, we are reminded once again why it is important to expand the EU budget if we want it to be there to fund all the things that needs to be funded. Another tool that is very much worth considering more is procurement. So that represents 14% of the EU GDP. If we were using it wisely to support decarbonized clean projects, that could also support the decarbonization of industry. So I'm just mentioning the EU level, but things also need to happen at the national level. Obviously, the EU will never be the only one to fund the decarbonization. It has to work across different levels, and we need to rationalize all the information is available for the industry, because at the moment, if they want to decarbonize and have a project, they need to kind of look at across a lot of different kind of funding and try to make sense of it. We do need to have a place where they can find all the information to need and identify easily what kind of funding is available for whatever stage they are at in their decarbonization project, and how to easily access it, because administrative burden can be quite important, and sometimes when the fund is available, you have some country or some company that do not access it just because they don't have the capacity administratively to do so, which obviously is an issue. At the national level, there is also a lot of opportunity for shared learning. We've seen some member states have developed carbon contract for difference, for example, that have proven very efficient. And so it would be very important to have shared learning, so to identify what kind of funding mechanisms have been useful and effective in some member states and how they can be replicated in different member states to ensure that different industry across Europe can decarbonize at an affordable cost and that the member states have the necessary tool to fund the transition. Besides funding, I see we're short on time, so I'm just going to be very quick and say another point that is quite important is innovation. So we do expect 50% of the emission reduction to be done by technology that are not yet on the market. And that's definitely something that requires more attention at the EU level. We need to have a comprehensive plan that supports technology from the very early stage of demonstration to the deployment on the market, and to have comprehensive and adapted policy to support every stage of innovation, which at the moment we do not have. At the moment, the EU is very strong in the early stage of innovation, but it's kind of falling behind when it is about bringing this innovation to the market and economically benefited from it. So that's definitely something that will require more attention in the next months.
Thank you, Alessia, for this question. For this insights. I see that we have some questions on our Q&A, and I think that it would be great if we answered on one of them. So I see that there is following question. How can the Polish industry benefit from integrating renewable energy sources, particularly by unlocking investments in the wind farms? That's very interesting questions, especially in this time during the debate on wind farms in Poland. Michał, could you elaborate on this a bit?
Yes, 1 year ago, I think the Polish Prime Minister Donald Tusk promised actually unlocking 5 to 6 gigawatts of onshore wind already this decade, and it's also in line with our market intelligence, because we've had already in 21. Guys, this is 4 years ago, where the previous government actually promised an withdrawal from this rigid spatial planning law with that practically limited and stopped the expansion of onshore wind. So, but at the same time, they kept this simply legal bill in the frozen state. They've unlocked from 1.5 kilometers to 700 meters. This still doesn't help because most of the projects are prepared for 500 meters. And with a liberalization of the spatial planning law by the new Ministry of Climate, which is so unfortunately delaying this process instead of pushing this further, we could have those easily 5 to 6 gigawatts. And what would be the impact? This is not just like, some theoretical number of renewables. These are mostly corporate PPA projects. So they would not only just land on a trade, on the power stock exchange, but they would help unlock direct buying of green electricity to mostly industrial consumers, including steel sector. So we speak of a potential coverage with those new onshore wind farms. We could easily, with their annual, this is just a simplification, but with their annual production, we could easily cover all of the electricity demand by all industrial emission intensive and electricity incentive consumers like steel, cement, chemicals, and so on. So I keep my fingers crossed once again for the government to push this forward and not wait anymore by adding new amendments to the law. Just go further.
Thank you, Michał. I think that we are ready to wrap it up. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. I would like to thank our panelists, Michał, Alessia, Piotr, for joining us today. I think that today's discussion was very interesting, and we shed some light on Polish decarbonization efforts while maintaining its industrial competitiveness. Please also join us to our other webinars, which will be coming in the next months. And thank you all for your attention, and I hope to see you soon on our other webinars. Thank you very much.